All right, I know that usually Not a Newbie is here breaking down current events, entertainment, and pop culture, but today, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I'm just wearing this outfit because I felt like it was about as stupid as the film was. Now, no, I do not hate this movie. I actually think it was a fun movie to watch, and frankly, if you asked me to go see it with you, I would definitely watch it again. It's a fun movie, and it's a little weird, it's a little silly, and narratively, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. To be honest, if we want to dig into spoiler territory, one of the main plot points of this film is the Barbie land and the real world kind of existing as like alternate universes, basically, that people can go back and forth from. That didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. I still think that the movie worked as a whole, though. It's a fun, silly movie. It actually gave me more vibes of like a cult classic film rather than like the type of film that the masses would go to and enjoy. Like, I think that without the master marketing, I think people might have come away from this movie being like, it's okay. It's not the worst thing in the world. And there will be like a small segment of the population who is like, this film is amazing. And I think maybe like 5 to 10 years from now, this film will probably end up having that sort of like cult status that I think that by default it would have earned. But I think for now it's just a wildly popular popcorn flick. Also, got to give it up to the actors who pulled this off, especially Margot Robbie, who I think probably did the best impersonation of being a Barbie doll. I think the person who played Alan, I think his name was like Michael Cera or something, he actually did a good job as well. The Ken sort of did. Who was it? Ryan Gosling, but he also was just sort of playing Ryan Gosling rather than rather than playing Ken. But all in all, the acting was great. I didn't think that there were any misses in the cast. The cast did a wonderful job, portraying the characters that they were there to portray. None of the celebrity cameos, so to speak, kind of felt ham-fisted. I do think that Will Ferrell did feel a little bit typecast as the head honcho in the real world, considering that he played a very similar role in the Lego Movie. So that kind of felt a little bit too familiar to be fun, but I think that he actually worked as well. But I will say this, because when it comes to reviewing the film critically, I actually don't think that there's a lot to say. Like the colors were amazing. One thing I thought was kind of interesting was that the main set of Barbie Land actually kind of felt like the stereotypical liminal space. All you would have to do is change the lighting, it would instantly turn into a creepy liminal space, which I think is actually kind of perfect for what Barbie Land is supposed to represent in the film, which is like this like fantasy, and it's just like not real, and kind of like sterile and void of life, just because they're not real people. They're Barbie dolls living in this world. So I thought that was kind of cool too. The CGI, when it was used, was pretty good. It was kind of tastefully spread and not really overdone. I liked all of like the little twinkles of all the little stars. I think that worked wonderfully. But the one thing that must be addressed when talking about this film, the massive elephant in the room, is the social commentary, because this film is absolutely rife with social commentary. I think it actually has too much social commentary. I think that social commentary kind of gets in the way of this film being a fun movie at times, because when this movie is trying to be fun, it can be very, very fun. But it can also be, kind of like a feminist think piece slash like first person trauma dump at times too, which kind of feels a little bit confusing and disjointed, considering that it kind of clashes with the general tone of the film, which is just overall fun. I did find that interesting. There are some things about the social commentary. I will say this about the film, that aren't all bad, but I do think that there were some nuggets in there that just weren't very good. So, for example, I feel like how it views both the Barbie world as well as the real life, it kind of just like seems to boil it down to very much like a men versus women type thing, where it's like in the real world. And actually, hold on, I should put in spoilers. Actually, it kind of shows the real world as a place where it's just men trying to dominate over the women, and then in the Barbie world, it just kind of shows the world as a place where the women dominate and the men like have no role, and the men are kind of sort of disgruntled because they derive all of their value in relation to the Barbies. So the Ken's purpose is to be there to please the Barbies, and it kind of works the other way in the real world. And I feel like both sides of that are kind of toxic, because it's not about one side of society ruling over the other. I feel like the perfect balance in what I call in my Discord, the pharmacy, where it's like all the subjects of relationships between men and women, both romantically and when it comes to interpersonal relationships too, and professionally. A perfect society wouldn't have just women at the top of the hierarchy or just men at the top of the hierarchy. It'd be men and women being equal, working together and lifting each other up and helping each other become better, rather than having one be the footstool for the other. But I think that this film overall kind of basically is saying that society now exists where men are just dominating over women because it's patriarchy. And in Barbie Land, it just views men as kind of being more or less useless, and that's just their role in society. That's how they're supposed to be. I do think that the portrayal of both are kind of cartoonish, especially when it comes to the portrayal of the real world, because in the real world there is not really some like overarching patriarchy necessarily. That's just like existing to keep women down. Like, yes, women do have troubles in society, but it's not completely one-sided, because men have troubles in society as well. And I think that there are some things in the film where it's like I don't necessarily connect with, or maybe I feel like it doesn't entirely make sense, such as like a woman just being scared to walk out in public when there are men present. I think that kind of is like a little bit silly, but I kind of do accept that maybe for the main character of this film, through which the entire film is basically through the lens of. It's like the main character is actually a mother in the real world who goes and takes out her dolls and starts to play with them. Maybe for her, that's just how she views society. So I think that it kind of works as a film, and I don't take that to be an objective judgment on what society is like, even if I do find it to be maybe a little bit silly. Now, in the end, though, I will say that it does have a good message for men, surprisingly. And I think that this is in large part because when it comes to addressing how society works for women, it bites off a little bit more than it can chew. For the men, the messaging is really good. The man in this story is kind of personified by Ken, and Ken has some major issues which are kind of shown off in the beginning of the film. He is completely obsessive over Barbie, all of his values tied up in her perspective of him and his ability to potentially get a relationship with her. Also, he views the goal of life to be so much about Barbie that he basically hates all of the Kens. He treats them poorly, he neglects them, he has friends, but he doesn't even really talk to them because he's so focused on, staring at Barbie whenever she's in the vicinity. And so that kind of addressed the first part of Ken's toxicity, which is obsessing over Barbie and making Barbie, sort of like the pinnacle of his own existence. At the end, Ken is told, and he accepts that, maybe it's not healthy, for you to tie up all your value in Barbie. Kind of have your own identity outside of, the job that you were given, which in this film is kind of funny. His job is beach. And maybe have some sort of value outside of liking Barbie, because you can be your own person rather than just someone who likes Barbie, because that's kind of boring anyways. Like, I think that was a really good lesson, especially when it comes to what we're seeing now with like the red pill community and the incel community, where it's like every single thing is about finding a mate, finding a partner. It's like, No, like there's a lot more to life than that. So I think that that messaging towards men is really good as far as like how to move forward. But when it comes to women, it's a little bit complicated. There seems to be like a huge victim complex where it's like everything is going against the women. Society is set up for women to fail. There are all of these standards for women and how they have to behave in society. And, that's not fair because men don't have to deal with the same thing. Women have to, fit inside of all of these boxes and behave within a very, very narrow set of parameters. Or else they're bad, they're rude, they're mean, or they're like tramps or whatever. Which I think a lot of it is kind of like self-imposed and internalized, because I'm not entirely sure that the entirety of society views women in that way, particularly now. But I do think that for feminists, that's like a lot of the narratives that they portray. So even though I don't think that that's how most people view women, I do think that that is a perspective that, while I think a bit silly, it's one that should be listened to because it's something that a lot of women believe. And I think, unfortunately, for the women, the lesson that Barbie learns in the end is basically to like shoot and aim for mediocrity, which I think is like a bad lesson. We also kind of see this for like both ends, for like men and women, because one of the lessons in the end is, in order for Barbie Land to be better, we need to give men like a little bit more power, but maybe not that much power, just a little bit. And the same, and kind of in the same vein for Barbie, at the end, she wants to strive to be normal Barbie. Like, she doesn't want to be like this super hot, perfect looking Barbie. She wants to be kind of mid. She doesn't, want to have like perfect days every day. She just wants to feel kind of good about herself, each day, sort of. What I think is like not great. And I do understand that one of the narratives in the film is that the whole point of Barbie initially, at least as the film portrays it, was to show women being in all these powerful positions, like being scientists, doctors, astronauts, all these different things, was to show women what they can be. But instead, it kind of made some women feel bad about themselves because they weren't achieving what they saw in the dolls. And I think that kind of like makes sense to a certain extent. But the response to that is just, settle for mediocrity. Don't portray all of these wonderful images of what women can be, because those things are not attainable. So, wear sweatpants all day. Like, don't strive for all these great things, which I think is like terrible messaging, because women can achieve great things and they have achieved great things in the past. And I think it's a bit silly to kind of like set up these like ideals of things to strive to, but also kind of make women feel like they're failures if they don't meet up to all of those expectations. And I think if instead you just have these like, these role models who are just mediocre, when you do that, it's just like you're de-incentivizing people to like strive for greatness and to like either better themselves or better society, right? Like, one thing too about the striving for mediocrity is, for Barbie Land, they don't even try to get equality. They're like, it's not realistic, just keep women on top, but maybe give men like a little bit more power. Like, no, the goal should have been, to have equality for men and for women. But instead they're just like, no, we want the matriarchy. Matriarchy now, pink power, let's go. What I think is just like maybe not the best messaging to send out either. Like, there's just a bunch of messaging in this film that's just like not great. Unless, when it comes to the men, is like to not be absolute simps and put all of your value in the Barbies, which I think is surprisingly good messaging. Like, I was not expecting this like out of a feminist film, but I did end up getting this. Now, when it comes to like what my rating is, like, is this movie good? Is it bad? I will say it's like it's good. It's okay. It's not awful. I think that there are enough fun moments outside of the social commentary that certainly make the film work. And I've heard some people say, just turn your brain off when you watch this film. And if that's what you're doing, then this film is probably going to be a perfect experience for you. Even though it is preachy at times, those times, while they're kind of intense, they don't take over the whole film. The whole film is at its core, it's a dumb, fun, silly movie. You don't have to take it seriously if you don't want to, which I think is probably the thing that's going to save this film's reputation long term. Because if it was just ham-fisted feminism and that's all it was, I think that people would have trouble enjoying it if they didn't agree with the film's worldview. But there's enough in the film for everyone to like. So I think that it is a good watch, especially like if you're an adult. And I would say go watch it. I would give it like maybe like a 7 out of 10. It's fine. It's good. It's not like perfect or it's not awesome. I do think that the aesthetic is really cool and the humor was great. It's not something you see in Hollywood every day. But in the end, it has more vibes of like a weird, fun cult classic film, not a mainstream mass audience type movie. And I think that's okay. That's completely fine. So, yeah, even though I'm a conservative, even though I'm not a fan of, of third wave feminism, this film it's a fun movie to watch. You don't have to take everything so seriously. You can watch something that has an ideology that you disagree with. It's fine. It's fine. And it's a fun movie. But I would like to know what you guys think about this movie in the comments. Because, a lot of people have some very passionate opinions. But anyways, in the meantime, I'm just going to chill over here being just Ken.